would you say that there's a utility to lying in the sense that I think, especially my personal opinion is lying has become more of like a social norm or a language in our society, right? Like, so you're sitting in an interview and someone goes, why do you want this job? You don't want this job, right? Like you need to eat, you need somewhere to live. You have to lie through that thing. Like no one has ever honestly been like, I've been dreaming of being a data processor at Google since I was 5. Like no one does that, right? Like no one's like, I want to be a mid-level strategy manager at a fintech firm or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. Or when your friends say, like, what's wrong with me? You can't actually give them the truth because on some level we all know our personal truths. But when we talk to other people, there's this sort of social expectation of lying and the sort of utility it performs. And I was just hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. That's a great question. So there's tiers of things that I want to say about that. So one thing is that it's true that often there's clear social pressure on us to tell a certain story, or to make things out to be more positive than they seem. And that's probably what most of us do in those contexts. I'm aware of examples to the contrary, and not just that, but I'm aware of that going really well for people. In other words, when someone's kind of come forward and been willing to say the thing nobody's expecting them to say, like to kind of call out the fact that, okay, look, who are we kidding? Of course I don't want to like check out your groceries at this, like I'm doing this because it's going to help me actually study up and save so that I can be a writer, which is what I really want. And that's honestly why I'm here. And I'm really excited at the opportunity to get to move forward. If I were the employer and I were interviewing someone like that, I'd be really impressed. Not everybody will be, right? And of course, like some people are going to be put off. You can't please everybody, right? If you're doing things right, no way you're not going to make some enemies along the way. Like, I think those are all true things. But I think the question is to really weigh in a kind of long-term principled way, like what are the costs and benefits over time of being a certain kind of person with these people and these interactions versus, putting on a show or versus like saying a certain line and kind of how, in terms of utility, kind of relative utility, what does this mean for if they do hire me? Like, am I going to have to now put this lie into, am I going to have to put on a show every day at work? And is that really an environment where I want to be working? And if you can find that job where honesty is celebrated, because I do think there's variability in like the corporate cultures, academic cultures, where you might find yourself. If you find those people, again, who actually like and celebrate open, honest feedback and communication, you're going to be a happier person because now you can kind of relax and speak your mind, right? But B, that redounds on your character over time, right? That's going to affect the kind of person that you're kind of shaping yourself to be through these daily interactions with those people. Okay, so that's A. B, and this may seem to contradict A, but I think they're kind of nuances of the same point. Lying, I want to be really clear. Lying is not the same per se, or the virtue of honesty is not, in this kind of rich conception of it as a virtue, it's not just the virtue of not lying, or of just like, telling the truth in some kind of simplistic, primarily social sense. There are definitely contexts in our lives where the right thing is to tell a fib, or to tell, the really obvious extreme cases are like, somebody with a gun comes to your door and asks, like, where are your kids hiding? Like, of course it's not the virtuous thing in that moment to say, oh, they're upstairs in the bedroom. Like, lie through your teeth. Say whatever you need to say, right? And that's a really extreme case that I think came up with Immanuel Kant, who actually thought we had a duty to not lie. And that's a very different view than what I'm sharing with you today, right? So there's a lot of context to consider when you're thinking, like, is this a case where I want to tell a lie? And you can do that in a way where you're really honest with yourself about what you're doing, or you can do it in a way where you kind of rationalize it to yourself and you kind of, over time, convince yourself of the lie, because that kind of makes it easier to tell it. But again, that now comes at the cost of your own self-credibility, your own character, your own just like informed consent. Like, do you even know anymore which job you actually want and why you're doing it? Or like, has this become the thing you've settled for because you've been telling yourself this story? So fundamentally, it's about kind of how do we relate to ourselves around these things. But I do think even social honesty can pay off in unexpected ways sometimes.